Hello, I am Jim Arient,
And I'm Beth Arient.
and we are here at the Peoria Riverfront Museum today to talk about American folk art.
We started collecting folk art in the late 1970s after I brought home a book from the Naperville, Illinois library that was on 20th century American folk art and artists.
And that book just caught our eye. We just loved everything in it, the imagery, pictures of the artists, stories about what led them to create their art, because they were all self-taught artists. They were artists who never went to art school, probably never took art classes in school. One day they just decided they needed to create something when they woke up, and some of them created paintings, drawings, some carved wood. Some of them decided to decorate their front porch or their yard or their house. And each one of them had just sort of a awakening where one day they had to create art, and that's what every person in the show here has a story like that as to what actually instigated them becoming artists. When Beth brought the book home from the library, we sort of had a feeling that some of these people who were in the book maybe were visitable. And so then we decided we were going to try to actually contact these people and see if in fact we could go travel to wherever they lived and collect their art. And in fact we were able to contact these people, and they were just overjoyed that somebody was interested in what they were doing. And then that started about a 25-year quest in which we visited 80 different artists and spent most of our spare time, rather than going to the beach in Florida, we visited folk artists all over the eastern half of the United States.
So I had a really interesting childhood. I felt like I spent more time on the road than in school, even though I know that's not the case. Was able to, and fortunate enough to, basically quarterly take a week to 2 week trip to go and visit all of about 80 different folk artists around primarily the American South, but also around the rest of the country, visiting them, meeting them, collecting their work. Most of these people ended up being like a second set of grandparents to me.
I'm not a Billy Graham, I'm not a Billy Sundays, I'm not a Shakespeare, I'm not a Abraham, I'm not a Elvis Presley. I do things that none of them can do. I'm Howard Finster.
Our relationship with Howard Finster started when I read a short write-up on him that he had a collection of some medical specimens that the local MD had given to him for his collection. And then by profession, I'm a dentist, and I decided he needed dental items. So I went to my office, picked out some instruments and some study models, and I put them in a box and sent them to Howard to contribute to his museum. And then he wrote a nice note back and said, "Thank you, I'm going to display those down here in Somerville, Georgia, and if you're ever in the area, come and visit." And so 6 months later, we visited Howard, and 1 minute after we met him, we knew we'd be friends with him forever. So I'd say over the years, we probably visited him at least 15 times, and we'd spend a couple days with him, morning, noon, and night. And he was the most energetic person you can imagine. I mean, he just never slept, was always thinking, creating, which is pretty amazing considering he only finished the 5th grade. Beth and I always joke that he is Leonardo da Vinci reincarnated, because he just was a stew pot of ideas. He just constantly was thinking, inventing, creating new art, an amazing human being. And we became best friends with him, and he sort of adopted us, and we became part of his family, and that is how we met Howard.
As a child, Howard's work is so visually appealing because there's bright colors, there's angels, there's pictures of fantastical towns and animals. And then when you would go to Paradise Garden, which was the environment that he built, he had a tower of bicycles, he had walkways built that you could go and play. I mean, it was really an interesting place for a child to spend time, and it really developed my love for art, and it's particularly this type of art, to the point that my daughter's middle name is Finster.
American folk art is important because it's a window into a group of people who had some inspiration. Each one had something, be it their neighborhood, their religion, politics. They all were inspired by something to create which is just so different than somebody who went to art school and actually has a degree in art. None of these people knew they were artists. Over and over when we visited these artists, we would talk about their art and they'd go, well, I'm not an artist. And we said, well, of course you are. And I mean, they didn't picture themselves being artists. They were amazed that people were interested in what they did. And we ran into that over and over again.
As a kid growing up, my parents would always say, oh, you'll be 80 years old and people will come and ask you about visiting these folk artists. You know, the timeline on this has accelerated so much. Back when my parents started collecting and I was traveling with them, there were very few people even in the United States that were collecting this type of art and didn't know that museums like here in Peoria would have interest in showing it or have people come and interview you about knowing these different artists. So the timeline has accelerated so much. You know, as a kid, I was like, oh, when I'm old and have my grandkids, they'll be like, oh, Grandpa, I saw a piece of art in a museum that, you know, is the same artist that you visited. But now my kids are able to come here today and see this high quality, wonderful museum and showing this type of work. It's just not something that I expected to happen so soon.
It's important, I think, that this is preserved. This is a part of the last half of the 20th century in American art. None of these people knew each other. They all worked independently. And I think it's important for them as a group to be shown, just so people understand that there was a group of creative people in America who made these amazing pieces of art.